Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? And welcome to day 7 of the Frontend Bootcamp. I am your mentor Gaurav, and today we will be learning about responsive UI and Flexbox. These are very important topics which help enhance the usability of your website across different devices. And Yeah, these topics will help you build better websites and take care of the usability. So how did you guys enjoy your weekend? Did you practice anything? Did you modify your portfolio? Did you get a chance to make it live? Let me know in the comments. All right. So yeah, some of you guys are saying you have been able to work on your portfolio, and yeah, thanks for the feedback. I'm glad that you guys are able to follow along, and you're able to learn new things from these videos, practice them. Yeah, all the videos are available. You can watch them on the Devsnest webs on the YouTube channel. Okay. All right. So let's do one thing. Let's wait a couple of minutes, and then we'll just start with the session for today. Uh, and yeah, so yeah, I've updated my UI as you guys can see. Uh, some of you are commenting on that as well. So don't worry about my UI, it will keep on changing, but the quality of the content and the the uh, the things that you want to learn, we'll be focusing on that. Let's keep our focus on that, and I will try my best to help you guys understand all the concepts properly so that you can make lots of projects. So let's start with today's topic. So the first topic that we will be looking at is responsive design. Let's understand the term. So basically, it means that our website is able to respond to different screen sizes, right? So whether you're viewing the website on a desktop browser, or you're viewing the website on a mobile, or you're viewing the website on a tablet or an iPad, the website should be usable, right? The user should not face any problems, and the contents of the website should adjust accordingly so as to accommodate the different screen sizes. So let's see how that is possible. um, so the first topic that we will be looking at is media queries. So let's get started with that. Let's open this in the browser. Right, let me zoom this a bit. All right. So there are different types of media available to us. So what we will do is, the way media query works is that they allow us to target different media types. So the different types which are available to us are print, screen, and all, right? And the way we use media queries is with the at the rate or the at rule, right? You use the keyword media, then you can specify a type. These are some of the types available to us, like print, screen, and all. So, for example, what the media type print represents is like, for example, if we view this document in the print mode, right? This is known as media type print. So, for example, when the media type is print, what I want is the background should appear as gray. Okay, for example, the background should be gray. All right, let me just comment this out. And so I want the background for the body to be gray, for example. All right. And here I specify the media type as print. So this is the media that I'm trying to select. Now, if I open the print preview, all right, when I try to print this page, it will actually show the media. Hang on a sec. If we inspect the screen and if you open this particular tab, so if I say function and escape, there is this property available to us known as rendering. If it's not available to you, what you can do is you can on Mac, you can press Command Shift P and just search for rendering. If you're using Windows, I think the shortcut should be Control Shift and P. Just search for rendering, okay? And then you should have this menu available to you. Let me zoom this a bit for you guys. Okay. And then the option that we're looking for is media emulate CSS media type, and here we have print and screen, for example. Now I have selected print, right? And you can see that the background color has changed from the default color white to this background of gray. All right. So this is how you can target different types of media. All right, and you can make use of this rendering option to emulate the that particular environment. Now if you go on to print that page, it will actually have a gray background. So if you want to have a different set of styling for the printing mode of a document, you can make use of this. So it's similar to how we write CSS. Okay, so normally we would write all of our rules over here. For example, the text color, I want to specify the color as white in this case. And when I'm using the background, I want the color to be black, for example. So you can see that how we normally write CSS, the same way you write your rules over here. It's that only when this media is available, these set of rules which are present within these matching curly brackets or within this media section. So these particular rules will be applied. Okay. Now we were talking about targeting different screen resolutions or different screen sizes. So let's look at how we can do that. So for example, what I want to do is let's go to this, let's select this option which allows us to select a different which allows us to have a responsive design right here in our browser. And before we do that, let me get rid of this emulation. I want to reset it back to no emulation. And let me shrink this. All right. So suppose what we want to do is I will select the device as iPad mini. Okay. And what I want is when my media is screen. Okay. And so I can specify different conditions over here, and the orientation is portrait. All right. What I want to do is, if you remember in the last lesson, we had learned about pseudo elements. So pseudo element allow us to specify, define a tag without using HTML tags. So let's say I want to add some content to the body, and I just want to display portrait over here. All right. And similarly, let's target the screen. Okay, media type screen, which is any screen basically, and the orientation is landscape. Okay, and I want to display the content as landscape. Right, let me save this and let me get rid of this. So you can see, let me comment this out as well. And let's get back to our style.css. So you can see right now the device is in orientation portrait. Now from here, I can change the device orientation. So it is zoomed out quite a bit. I'm not able to see that option. Let me zoom out slightly. Okay, so you see this button. This allows us to toggle between landscape and portrait orientation. Now if I change the orientation to landscape, you can see that this particular rule is being applied. Okay, and it has changed the content from portrait to landscape. So using media queries, we can target different types of devices. Okay, different types like, by type I mean screen or print, and even within a particular device we can target the orientation. So we over here we were targeting the portrait orientation, and over here we were targeting the landscape orientation. And suppose I have some default rule over here. So I'll say font size within the body is 1.5 rem. Okay, so you can see that this rule is getting applied, and on top of that, whichever condition is true. So you can think of these as if conditions basically. If this condition is true, this particular rule will be applied, and if this condition is true, then these set of rules will be applied along with the default rules. Okay, but we can override the default values as well, which we are writing over here. Okay, so these will get applied as it is, and if we need to override them based on some condition, we can do that as well over here. All right, so when we are in landscape mode, we want to increase the font size to 2 rems, for example. So we can do that as well. So you can see that the font size has increased over here. Okay, so far is that clear to you guys, how we can target different devices, and not different devices, basically different types of media, and the orientation which is available to us. Is it clear to you guys? And if you're not able to find the rendering option, you can just google it, like how to show the rendering tab in Chrome. Okay, if the instructions were not clear, You can search it and you should find a result for that. But the easiest way that I know of is that you can just press Control Shift or P if you're on Windows, or if you're on Mac, you can press Command Shift and P and just search for rendering, and it should show you all of the options which are there for rendering. All right. Okay. So the use of orientation is that when you're holding your mobile device, vertically, that is the portrait orientation, right? And when you turn it like this, when you turn it horizontally, it is the landscape orientation. And the use of that is that you can change the amount of content that you see in each orientation. Okay. We'll look at an example in just a bit. Another option that is available to us is that we can target different screen sizes or different devices using media query. So let's look at how we can do that. So for example, I want to target uh, the suppose what I want is on all mobile devices, the background color of this page should be green. Okay. So how I can do that? Let's take a look. So I can say media, and then if you do not specify anything, it targets all of the media types. And I can say over here, this is my feature that I want to target. Width, max width. Okay. If the max width is 500, I want to show the background color as light green, for example. Okay. And I want to do that for the body element. All right. So let's select the responsive option. And over here, I just wrote 500. So it does not understand what is 500. So I need to specify a unit over here. So I will specify 500 pixels. Okay. Now the moment, so I have selected the responsive option from here. So what we can do is if we use this, we are able to change the screen size. The moment I am going below 500 pixels, you can see that the color has changed from, white to this light green color. Okay. So this is how I can target different devices. So for example, the iPhone 10R has these dimensions, right? It has a width of 414 pixels and a height of 896. Okay, these are the dimensions. And for example, let me switch to iPad mini. So it has a high dimension, right, which is beyond 500 pixels. So you can see that the background color has changed to white. Okay. Similarly, if I want to target all devices which are desktops, for example, I can say that I can specify a min width. Okay. And if the min width is say 800 pixels, so what I'm saying is that the minimum width to start with is 800 pixels. Okay. So this will target screen sizes or the viewport size which is beyond 800 pixels. So in that case, what I want to do is I want to say background color is royal blue, for example. Okay, so you can see that this is beyond 800, so it is having the background color as royal blue. Let's switch back to the responsive mode. So up to 500, this will be, you can see that 499, and then 500 it changes to white on at 501. Okay, so up to 500 this media query is being applied, right? and beyond that it is white, and once it crosses 800 it is having a background color as royal blue. All right, so this is how you can target different devices and different viewports basically. So by viewport we mean the visible area of the website. Okay, whatever is visible. So this is the viewport right now. This entire area is the viewport at this point of time, right? If I change it to this much, so this is my viewport. Okay, this entire thing is my viewport. Whatever is the visible screen size, that is my viewport. So we can target different viewports, okay, or different devices using this. All right, so we can have different combinations. So up to so and so screen size, we can have this style, and then beyond the screen size, we can have this style. So let's look at a example for this. So, but before we move on to the example, is the basic idea clear to you guys? Like how to use a media query? Okay, so we do that using the @ rule. We use the media keyword, then we can target different media types and we can specify conditions like this. Okay, so over here also we can add multiple conditions, and for example, orientation is landscape. Okay, so you can see that this light green color has vanished because right now the orientation is portrait. If i if it becomes landscape, you can see that the green color gets applied. Okay, so this is how you can have multiple conditions as well. So, and if you do not specify any media type, it targets all the different medias. Okay, so we have an option known as all as well. Okay, either you can type it like this or you can leave it out and the default value is all, right? Okay, so let's look at an example right in our portfolio. So for that, what I will do is let me open the code for the portfolio and let's test the responsiveness of our portfolio. Okay, so I have the code open for the portfolio over here. And if you are joining the stream just today, all the previous lessons are available on this channel. You can just search for the front end playlist and go through all the topics starting from day one. Okay, and you can revisit those sessions after this particular session. I'm sure you'll be able to understand something or the other. All right, so this is available to us on localhost 5500. So this is the state of our portfolio at this point of time. You can see right now that our header breaks basically when we are on a lower screen resolution. So up till this screen resolution it is fine. Then as we go, below 600, you can see that this is breaking up. Let me move this to the side, and you can also see that there's a horizontal scroll coming. This piece of, there's this gap. What we would have liked is the all of the content to appear without a horizontal scroll, right? So let's see how we can fix these issues and make our portfolio responsive. So in order to do that, what we will do is let's go to index.html. All right. By the way, are you guys able to see the VS Code properly? Are you able to read the font? You can just let me know in the comments if the font size is good enough for you. Okay, so you guys can see it. All right, let me resize this over here. All right, let's move on to the coding part. So there are a couple of things which I'd like to fix first before we move on to the responsiveness. So if you notice over here, let me increase this. So if you notice this element over here, we have margin as well as padding over here. The padding is not really required, and also if you see, there is double margin being applied, so there is a margin on the right as well as margin on the left. So this is quite a lot of space. Let's get rid of this first. Let's go to style.css, and what we want to do is let's get rid of this padding. So the padding is gone, and then what we want to do is we don't want to apply a margin on all the directions. What we'd want is we just want to have a margin on the right hand side. Okay, so you can see that more content is available. We still have a margin, but it's just on the right hand side, right? Since our content is aligned from left to right, I'm just adding a margin towards the right hand side, so there's a sufficient amount of spacing between all the elements. And then what I want is that there's nothing after this, right? So we can get rid of the margin after this element. So what we can do over here is we can target this same element, and within it we can say that when this is the last child, okay, what I want to do is I want the margin right to be reverted. Okay, so I use this special property known as revert, and if we look at this element now, there is no extra margin. Okay, you don't see that orangish color over here like you see for this element. So we can target the first child or the last child like this. Suppose I do not want the first element to have any margin, so you can see that the margin has shrunk just for the first element, but we want this for the last one, so I'll switch it back to the last element. All right, so we have made these changes. This looks much better. There was some extra spacing. Uh, we have gotten rid of that. Then what we want to do is let's create a different navigation for the mobile devices. What we will be doing is that we will have a menu option over here, and we will not be showing all of the links over here when we are on a mobile device or a device which is of screen resolution less than 500 pixels. Instead, we will show a menu button, and when the user clicks on the menu button, we will be showing a menu which basically appears from the top and takes up the entire viewport, and we will be showing all of the menu options when the user clicks on that. So we will be having a sliding menu which slides from the top and moves all the way to the bottom, and when we close it, it just slides back up again. So the first thing that we will be doing over here is that let's create another nav. All right, let's give it a class mobile nav. Okay, and for this one, let's call it as the default nav. All right, and then within this, what we want to do is we want to have a button, right? Let's call it as menu. It should show the text menu. Now what we want is that button should only be visible when we are at a screen resolution which is below 500 pixels. So let's write a media query for that. So we will say media, okay, and we will specify for the type screen, and then we want to, so there is another syntax which is available to us. The normal way is we would have said max width, all right, as 500 pixels, and in that scenario we want to do something. Okay, we want to write some rules over here. So there is a newer way of writing the same thing. So instead of saying max width and the value like this, I can basically make use of a condition over here. I can just say width less than 500 pixels like this, and it basically means the same thing, that for all devices which are less than 500 pixels, all the rules that we specify over here will be applied. All right, so this is specifically for devices less than 500 pixels. So by default, what we want is the mobile nav. It should be hidden, right? So the way we can do that is we can say display none. Okay, so you can see the moment I wrote display none, the menu button has vanished. Okay, so this item is there, but it's not visible to us. All right, okay, then what we want is when the width is less than 500, we will target the default nav, and we will say display none over here. And in case of the mobile nav, we will say display revert. So revert will basically revert it to whatever was the uh, whatever is the initial value for this particular nav. So the initial value would be display block, right? Okay, let me save this. And now if we change the screen resolution, you can see that as I went below 500 pixels, we just see this menu button, right? And the navigation is hidden, right? So this is a visible up to 600 pixels. And the moment I go below that, we just see the menu button, all right? Okay, so this is how you can hide and display items using media queries. The next thing that I want to do is let's style this a bit more. So we have our button, right? Let's give it an ID, menu button, okay? And so the menu button has a let's set the display to block, okay? And let's set the background to transparent. So whatever is the, right now this is, slightly grayish, so whatever is the background, it will be visible. Like wherever this button is placed, it will be having a transparent background, so it will pick up the color background of its parent. So you can see that it has become slightly white. Let's give it a border radius of 8 pixels, so it has this rounded curves. Okay, and what we want is we want this item to appear on this side of the screen. Okay, so let me zoom out a bit. And let me minimize this now. Okay, so we will say margin left auto. So because of that, this is appearing on the far right hand side because we are giving an auto margin, so it's shifting this. So this is giving it a default margin of left, so the entire margin is taking up, it's taking up the remaining space, and the space required for the menu item, uh, whatever space is required by the menu item, it's giving in that, and whatever is remaining, that it is setting as the margin on the left hand side. Okay, so you can see that over here. So it has a margin of 401 pixels, so whatever space is needed by this, it is giving that, and the rest of it um, is all being set as margin left when we do it like this, right? Okay, another thing that we notice over here is that this image, because of this image also, we are getting a horizontal scroll, if you notice over here, right? So let's fix that as well. So the original dimensions which we had set is 400 by 400 for this image. So what we will do is, when the media has a width of less than or equal to 400 pixels, we want to say that the image should take up the width as 100%. Whatever is the width of its container, it should take up 100% of that. Okay, so give me a second. Let me reset the zoom for a minute. Okay, so since this is an ID based rule, right? So this has precedence, this has a higher specificity. Let's target this particular rule itself, and let's target the profile image. Let's save this, and you can see that now we don't have a horizontal scroll, right? Everything is appearing properly. Let me zoom the screen. Oops, not this one, this one. And you guys can see that we no longer have a horizontal scroll over here. Let me save this. Yeah, so the horizontal scroll is gone. So it was appearing because of this image, and so this image will have dimensions of 400 by 400 in all other resolutions. The moment it goes below 400 pixels, right? Over here you can see actually it is breaking up right here as well. So let's do one thing. Let's change this to uh, let's move this rule, or rather let's keep this rule over here so that you guys can see that we can have multiple conditions like this. So this is the default one where it has a width of, you can see height and width of 400 by 400 over here. And the moment we go below 450, you can see that the width has been set to 100%. All right, so that way we are maintaining the padding, default padding, and the image isn't flowing out of its container, right? And then over here we have our menu button. What we want is when we click on this, the menu items or the all the links should slide from the top. So let's create that area which will have all of the menu items. Okay, so what we will do is we will have a section, and let's call it as menu. Okay, all right, and within that we will have another nav, and within that let's add a unordered list, and this unordered list will have let's just create this tag. So we need to show all of these links, right? So let me copy it and paste it over here. Let me move all of them to another line. And then what we will do over here is let's use the multi-line cursor. Let's add a li tag, and let's select all of these elements and put them within the LIs. Let's save this, and you can see that all of these menu items are appearing. So what we want is we do not want these menu items to be visible unless and until we click on the menu button. Okay, so let's target this element. So by default the mobile nav as well as the menu, okay, section dot menu, it should have the display set to none. Only once we are within our specified device we can say section dot menu. Actually we don't want to do it. Yeah, we can do it over here as well. We can say display revert, so you can see it over here. And another thing that we will do is by default, okay, I want to write more style, so I'm just moving this out of here. Let me write a different selector for this altogether. Okay, so for section.menu we'll say display revert. Then what we want is this element. By default this should have a height of 0. Okay, then you see that this content is overflowing, this technologies, this is overflowing out of it. So we will say overflow as hidden. Okay, so now this particular the menu item which was flowing out, that has been hidden. Then what we want is let's create another new file which has all the JavaScript code related to the menu items. So let's just create a file known as menu.js, and let's link it to our index. So script source menu.js. Okay, And then inside menu.js, what we will do is document.add event listener. We'll look for the DOM content event. We'll wait for this event to happen so that we know that all of the content within our website has been loaded. Once that happens, what we will do is we will be basically finding the button. Okay, so we'll say document dot get element. Hang on a sec, what did we call this button? Menu button, right? So let me copy this and let's switch to our file. So get element by id, and this is the id, and we will say add event listener, click, and when we click on this, we want to basically do, we want to show that particular side, we want to show our menu, right? So let's create a function over here. Let's call it as show menu. Okay, and actually instead of passing this anonymous function over here, what we will just say is show menu, like this. And over here what we will do is document dot query selector. It has the class menu, right? So we will target using the menu selector. Okay, section dot menu. We can get more specific just like this. We can say section dot menu over here. So let it find that section. So let's take this in a variable const menu, and then we will what we will do is we'll say menu dot style dot height equals 100%, and this needs to be a string like this. Okay, so when we click on this, you can see that this is taking, this is basically expanding this, but it's not setting the height as 100% because this is a block level element. So what we will do is for this menu, we will set the position as fixed so that it just breaks out of this flow. Okay, it is taken out of its natural flow. Okay, let's make this change. Now when I click on menu, hang on a sec, we will say top 0, and so we have given it a position of fixed so that it is relative to the viewport. Then what we want to do is so it's not visible right now because it is being hidden behind this particular tag. So we want to give it a z index so that it is moved to the front. Let's set the z index as 1, and you can see the remaining menu items. Let's also give it a background. So right now let's give it a background of white, which is this, and we wanted to have a width of 100% so that it covers the entire screen. This is what we wanted, right? So we have given it a default width of 100%. Let me refresh this. Now when I click on menu, you can see that it is initially having a height of 0, and then the height has been set to 100% the moment we click on this button. So if you remember from our lesson on DOM, right, there is another, the browser creates another model known as the CSS object model, and to access all of the properties of an HTML element, we access the CSS object model using the style property, and then we can set individual properties over here like this. So you can see that if we inspect this element over here, this element, let me go up slightly. So this section element has been applied an inline style over here. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is uh, we want to be able to close this menu, right? So in order to do that, let's create a function. Okay. Close menu, and we will basically get the same. Let's just copy this for now. We'll get the same menu and we will set its height back to 0. Okay, and we want to be able to call this function from somewhere, so we will be adding another button right over here. Let's create a button. Let's give it an ID close menu. Okay, and what we will say over here, so we can use special values. So there's a special value known as and times. Okay, ampersand and times, which basically adds a cross. So you can see this, x or a cross basically. This way, we will be using this for closing our our menu. And what we want to do is let's select this particular element, and so this is an ID based element. Let's give it a position of absolute, and from the right we wanted to appear 16 pixels from the right, and from the top it should leave a space of 16 pixels. Okay, so you can see that from the top it is leaving a space of 16 pixels, and from the right it is leaving a space of 16 pixels. And we want to set the background as transparent. Okay, sorry about that. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to increase the font size, so we can use values such as extra large. So you can see that the size of the button has increased, and we want to set the border to none so that this this box kind of appearance is lost. Okay, and yeah, so we have our button available to us. Then within the menu item, what we want to do is document dot get element by id close menu, and we want to add an event listener on the click, and we want to call the close menu function when this event happens. Okay, and when that event happens you will be setting the height back to 0. All right, did I get the name wrong? Close menu. Okay, I misspelled it over here. All right. So now I'm clicking on menu. Now when I'm clicking on this cross button, you can see that the menu items are collapsing. Um, let's change the styling. So what is common across both of the navigation links is that we do not want a text decoration. So what we will do over here is let's extract this outside. Okay, we do not need a text decoration for our default menu as well as this one. And another thing that we want is it should the list style. Okay, so we will set the list style. So we do not want these dots to come, right? So when we are within our section menu, so we will say section dot menu, and we want to target the unordered list within that menu. We want to say the list style should be set as none, so these dots have gone. And similarly, what we want to do is all of the list items which are there, let's give it a margin from the bottom of 16 pixels, so these are evenly spaced out. And the section menu itself, so let's take a look at this element. So what we will do over here is that this nav, we will target this nav, and let's give it some margin from the top. Okay, so section dot menu, and within that we are targeting the nav element, and we are basically going to say margin top. So I like to use multiples of 8. Okay, so you can see that it has moved slightly down. And let's also increase the font size. Let's set it to 1.5 rem, so the text is clearly or easily readable to us. Okay, so when I click on this, it collapses. When I click on this, it expands. And as I'm changing my screen resolution, I'm seeing the correct navigation menu. If I'm on a smaller device, I'm just seeing this menu button, and when I click on this, it expands and collapses like this. Another thing that I want to do is when I'm clicking on any of these links, I want this menu to close. So let's see how we can do that. So let's take a look at the selector for this. So we are inside menu, and then basically we want to select these list items, right? So what we will do is let's yeah, let's create a function. Let's say add click to menu items. Okay, so we will find all menu items, so we will use document dot query selector all, and let's write a selector over here. So we want to target the section which has the menu class, and within that we want to target the nav and the the list and its items like this. Okay, so let's take this in a variable menu items like this. So this will give us a list. What we want to do is loop through all of the menu items. So let menu item of menu items, and then what we want to do is menu item dot add event listener. We want to listen to the click event, and we want to call the close menu function when that event occurs. And we need to call this function so that all the uh, so we call the function like this and click to menu item. Let me rename this, let's make this plural. All right, so we have called this function now. Okay, and let's click on the menu. Let's select one of the menu items. When I'm clicking on that, it is scrolling to that particular menu item and also closing uh, the menu which is appearing from the top. Okay, and let's do one thing for the sake of convenience. Let's move all of the query selectors here and the functions to the top. Okay, so we have been able to basically expand the menu item, collapse it, and when we click on one of the links, it is collapsing it as well. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is so if you see this is having this purplish color for all the links which have been visited. So let's target such links. So this is also something which is common, right? Let's get rid of this. We want to set the text decoration to none. Sorry, we want to set the text decoration to underline whenever we are hovering over any of these elements. Okay, and this should be common whether we are in the default view or in the or the mobile device. So we have done that. Another thing that we want to do is similarly, if that link has been visited, okay, we want to set the color, we want to revert the color, not revert, actually what we want to do is we want to set the color property as inherit. So whatever is the default color for its parent, it should show that. Okay, so let me save this. Okay, so it's actually setting the black color. Let's set the color to royal blue, so it's always this color. And when we are on the menu, let me do a refresh. Nav and the anchor, let's get rid of this, and you can see that it has the color as royal blue now. Whether this link has been visited, we are always seeing these colors. Okay, so far is uh, are the things which we have covered right now, are they clear to you? Let me know in the comments. So the portfolio, as we said, that the things that we have been learning so far, we will be applying that knowledge in our portfolio, right? So that you have a fully functional portfolio. So in the last class we learned about the positioning of elements, so we have applied that knowledge over here, right? And we also learned about media queries to target different devices, so you can see that we are applying that knowledge over here. As you select a particular device, so let's select iPhone SE for example, we see this menu button. If I select an iPad mini, we have our links like this. Okay, so it is clear to most of you. Let's do one thing. Let's take a short break over here of 5 minutes, and then we will continue working on the other topics for this lesson. Let me close this, and you can see that we are back to our default screen resolution, and all of the items are appearing, all the menu items are visible over here. So there's a question why contact is coming of different color. What do you mean by contact? Can you elaborate in the chat? So let's do one thing. Let's set the color to royal blue for all of the elements. So it was having that default color, right? So the contact link, I have not clicked on it yet, so it was having a slightly different color, so we have specified a default color for it now. So even when the state changes to visited, we are keeping the color as royal blue. So we're keeping a uniform color irrespective of the state the link is in. Okay. So there's a question how to remember all of these things. You build things from time to time, and if you just try to implement different things, okay, as you get stuck on a problem, at least you do have some idea about the topic, right? So for example, you want to use media queries, so you can do a search on media queries and you will find the syntax for it, and then you just need to apply that syntax on the piece of code that you're working on. So even I don't remember everything, okay? There are times when I'm searching for things on the net. I know how to do things, but I don't remember the exact syntax. So I just search for that particular keyword. Or sometimes if I don't even remember, what needs to be done, I just search for it. I will find the answer on Stack Overflow or some other website, okay? So you can always query for the solutions to your problems and you'll find an answer. It's just you should be able to apply that knowledge within your code. That is the thing. So the idea over here is to make you familiar with things, how to use these concepts, how to apply these concepts to real world problems, and then you need to practice them obviously to get a better understanding, but you don't have to memorize everything. Okay, this is not a memory test. um, you just need to be able to, search things, and when it's needed, you look it up and basically apply that. So even I don't remember everything. I just know that it is possible, and then I just remember some keywords and I search accordingly. Okay. All right. Yeah, we can. There was a question that can we have the menu appearing from the side? Yeah, you can do that also. Right now, we are playing with the height over here, right? So this side nav, this menu has the height as 0 and the width is 100%. If you wanted to appear from the left, you can set the height as 100% initially, and the width you can set as 0. And then as you're clicking on the menu, you can basically play along with the width over here. You can set the width as 100% and reset the width to 0. So it will appear as if it's coming from the side in that case. Okay. All right. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat that what is the meaning of that greater than selector, right? So it just means that it's an immediate child, as answered by someone in the chat, and that is why that selector was failing, because over here we it's not an immediate child. In between we have the unordered list and the list item. Here it was an immediate child, so that is why I had to get rid of that nav greater than a, and it basically selected all the anchor tags within the navigation tag. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next topic. So what we will be learning next is, let me switch back to our other coding example. And the next thing that we will be learning about is the transform property. So I have already created a div over here which has the class name as box, and the box definition has been provided over here. It has a background color of royal blue, a width and a height of 300 pixels, and some margin. Okay, so let me switch to that. Localhost 5501, and we want to look at the transform section. Okay, so we have this box, right? So what I want to do is, let's get rid of this responsive design. Let me increase the size. Okay, let's take this up. So there's a property known as the transform property. Let me zoom this in for you guys. Okay, and within the transform property, it allows us to make some transformations to certain elements. So for example, I want to rotate this, okay, by 45 degrees. So I can do so by making use of the transform property, and we have different functions available to us. For example, I want to rotate this, so I make use of the rotate function, and over here I can specify the degrees by which I can rotate. So rotation by 45 degrees is like this, by 90 degrees is like this, then somewhere 117 degrees, and so on and so forth. So either I can make use of degrees, or I can make use of another unit which is available known as turn. So if I wanted to turn by 50%, so I can say 0.5 turn like this. But so 50% turn basically means 180 degrees. I wanted to turn by 45 degrees, so that's approximately point 0.13 turn. But I think degrees are easier to use, so you can make use of that unit. Okay, so this is a function which is available to us. Suppose what I want to do is when I am hovering over this box, okay, I want to transform this and I want to scale this to twice of its size. Okay, and now let me just refresh this, and you can see as I'm hovering over this element, it is scaling to twice its size, right? So this rule is getting applied. If I want to scale it to 1.5 times its size, I can do that. And I can so this accepts two parameters, scale in x direction and y direction. If you do not specify x and y, it applies that to both the directions. Okay, and individually also we can do that. If I want to you know scale its height by half, so I can specify 0.5. Let me get rid of this hover. Okay, so along the x-axis it is doubling, and along the y-axis it is basically shrinking in height. Okay, so I can make use of the scale function to do that. Another thing that I can do is suppose on hover, instead of scaling, I want to move this element, so I can make use of the translate function like this. Let me undo the hover. Now when I'm hovering, you can see that it's moving in the x direction as well as the y direction. Suppose I just wanted to move along the x axis or horizontally, so I can just specify translate, hang on, translate along the y direction. We do not want it to translate along the y direction, just along the x direction. Now when I'm hovering on this element, you can see that it's moving, right? So basically setting this property allows us to move in different direction. Okay, then similarly what we can do is, we want this element to skew or slant on hover. So what we can do is, let me select this element, and on hover I want it to skew, okay, by 10 degrees in x and y direction whenever I hover this element. So I can do that as well. Okay, so the transform property accepts different functions, and you can use them to basically perform some transformations on an element. Similarly, what I want is I want to basically apply multiple translations, so I can do that as well. I wanted to scale by 1.2 times its size, as well as uh, translate along the y-axis. So there are individual functions available as well. So translate y, if you just use the translate function, you can specify x and y together. There's a translate 3D as well, where you can specify x, y, as well as the z-axis values. The z-axis would represent how close or how far an element is. Since we have a 2D element, so it doesn't make much of a sense to make use of this attribute. So suppose I want to translate in the y direction by 50 pixels, we can do that as well. So this is scaling as well as moving down by 50 pixels. Okay, so we can apply multiple transform functions like this. Okay, So this is all about the transform function. So I'm using the Chrome browser. There was a question about this in the chat. Okay. Okay, and we have mentioned it at the beginning of the course that this is the browser that we will be using for our learning throughout this course, as it has a couple of useful features and options which are helpful for learning, right? I think most of the features are available in Firefox and Safari as well, but just it is something that it is, you know, Chrome is something which is commonly used. So that is what we will be sticking to. All right, so these are the different transform functions which are available, and you can apply these in your portfolio as well. I won't show you how. That's the homework for you guys. I want you guys to practice and maybe apply some of these transformations for, for example, whenever you're hovering on an element, you can scale it. Okay. The next thing that we want to learn is the is transition basically. So let's understand what transition is. So transition property allows us to, add a delay between the it allows us to move from one state to another state gracefully, right? It allows us to notice that difference. So let's understand what transition means and how it is helpful in terms of user experience. So we have this index.html over here. Let me just switch to transition. Okay. And we have the same set of styles, transition index.html. Okay. Let me just link the style sheet. I forgot to do that. Save this, and we have another box available to us. Now what we want to do is as we are hovering on this box, right? So we want to scale it. So box on hover. So this is another state, right? This is the normal state, and when we are hovering over it, it is transitioning to the hover state for this element. When that happens, we want to say transform, and we wanted to scale by 1.2 times of its original size, so which is this basically. But you can see that this is happening instantaneously, right? So let's see how we can make use of transition. So there are different properties on which we can apply the transition. So right now we want to apply the transition on the property of transform, like this. Okay. And then we want the transition duration, or we want this transition, from the normal state to the hover state to happen after a delay of 100 milliseconds. So you can specify the value in milliseconds like this, or you can say zero point 0.1 second like this. Okay, let's save this. Now do you notice it is happening slightly, it's happening slowly compared to before where it was happening instantaneously. Let's increase this to 500 milliseconds. So when you move your mouse over this element, you can see that it is smoothly expanding like this. So what this transition duration is doing is that during this duration of zero point 0.5 seconds, we are watching the transform property, and it will scale from its initial size to 1.2 times of its initial size within this duration. Okay, so it allows us to gracefully move from one state to another like this. So you can see that how neat and how neat it is, right? So the user doesn't get a shock like, okay, I moved my mouse over this element. Let me comment this out, right? If we do it like this, there's sudden shock to the user, right? What happened? Why is this happening, all of a sudden? Instead, if we do it gently using the transition property, it has a good experience on the user, right? And similarly, we want the transition to start after a particular delay, so we can specify that over here. So once we have hovered over here, and once the user has hovered and zero point 0.4 seconds have elapsed or 400 milliseconds have elapsed, that is when the transition will begin, when we specify the transition delay property. Now my mouse is over this element, and after 400 milliseconds have passed, then the transition begins. Okay, let me increase this slightly to 1000 milliseconds so that it happens 1 second after the mouse is over this element. So you notice the difference, right? So it exits out of that transition after 1 second and also enters that transition after 1 second. Okay. And the other property which is available to us is the transition timing function. So there are different options available to us. So for example, ease in, right? Let me get rid of the transition delay. So this basically controls how the transition, happens within this duration. Ease in means like in the beginning it is slow, and then towards the end it is very fast. Okay, so it eases into that transition. Similarly, we have ease out. Okay, so towards the end of the transition it is basically more slow. And similarly, we have a combination of ease in and ease out. So you can try out the different functions. We also have something known as the let me inspect this. So we also have something known as the cubic bezier, which is basically a curve which defines how the transition is happening, right? So we can play around with its value, and it shows how the transition would behave. So if I do it like this, you can see that initially it is slow, and then towards the end this is fast. Okay, and if I move it around here, you can see that initially it is fast, then towards the end it is slightly slow. So it is initially slow and then fast. So let's make use of this function like this. So you can basically click on this symbol to open this. So there are different options available to us. We can make use of any of these, right? So these are the default ones, like ease in, ease out. So you can see that it is slow to begin with and slow towards the end. And then we have fast in the beginning, fast, slow in the beginning and then fast towards the end. And then we have ease out, right? So this is how it is working: fast in the beginning and then slow towards the end. So the closer these elements, that means the slower the transition is happening. The more space there is, it basically means the transitioning is happening fast. Okay, and then you can customize this, which gives us the cubic bezier. So if we copy this like this, we can specify a cubic bezier. I don't know what's the exact pronunciation for this, but you can basically make use of this, and it affects the way the transition behaves. All right, So these are the different properties which are available. uh, we can combine all of these into a single property as well. So we can say, let me comment this out, and okay, and instead we want to specify the same thing. We can directly say transition, and we want to watch the transform property. Then the transition duration is of 0.5 seconds. Then there's a, the transition delay is, for example, 1 second. And we specify the transition timing function. So let's copy this over here. So basically the same thing is happening in one line as well. Transform. Okay. So you can see that after a delay of 1 second, the transition begins. Okay, so let me reduce it to zero point 0.4 seconds. So now it's happening, slowly. So this is the shorthand property. If you if you inspect this, you will be seeing the same functions that we had written, same properties which we had written individually, right? Okay, so this is how we can apply different transitions, and we can watch multiple properties as well. So suppose when we are hovering this, we are changing its width from 400 to say 600 pixels. So we can specify multiple transition properties using comma, and then over here we can say the property that we want to watch with. The transition delay should begin after points. I mean, the transition duration is zero point 0.6 seconds. And let's not specify any transition function over here. Let's see what happens. So you can see that it is expanding as well as, it is scaling at the same time, right? So this is how you can apply transition to multiple properties. Another thing is, if you want the same transition to happen to all the properties, what you can do is, you can specify all over here. So the same thing will happen to all of the properties, right? But this is not recommended, as it will, watch changes to all of the properties. It is a performance hit. So it is recommended that you use specific properties. So if you're watching the transform, if you're interested in the transform property, you specify the transform property. And if you're interested in width, you specify that over here. If you want to apply, if you're interested in multiple properties, you can just use comma separated values and specify the individual transition timing functions and delay for all of them. So that is another advantage of using individual properties. So let's do one thing. Let's use this transition effect within our portfolio now, because the sliding animation is happening all of a sudden. What we will do is we'll go to style.css, and what is needed is we will be setting a transition on the menu. Okay, let's apply the transition. We are interested when the height is changing, right? So let's specify the height over here, and let's give it a delay of 0 0.5 seconds. Let's switch to our portfolio, and we click on the menu. You can see that after a delay of 0 0.5 seconds, the transition is happening within the duration of 0 0.5 seconds. Let me change it to 0.8. So you can see that it is much smoother compared to what it was before, right? So earlier it was happening instantly, right? So we want to improve the user experience, so we added a transition on the height. And let's make use of the ease in, ease out function, okay, so that it eases into the transition and eases out towards the end. You can make use of a cubic bezier as well, so you can try out the different examples on your own. Okay, all right. Similar to this, we have uh, another property which is known as animation, right? So let's quickly look at that. Let's switch to our sample code. So similar to, transitions, we have an animation property, and we have similar functions like these. So let's define an animation. So what we will do now is, let me comment this out. Let's make use of, so what we will do is, first let's define an animation. So you define animation using keyframes, that it is a keyword, and then we specify the name of the animation. So suppose let's call it as moving or rotation, for example. Let's call it as rotation. We'll rotate this box, and from, this is the starting point. So we want to make use of the transform, and we want to rotate this box from 0 to, so this basically specifies the starting point from, right? And from 0 we want to rotate to 360 degrees, right? So we want this square to rotate, have a complete rotation. So this is the starting point, and then this is the ending point. And to add the animation property, you make use of the animation, all right, or we can make use of the shorthand property. So we specify the animation name, which is rotation. The animation duration, let's specify this as 0.5 seconds, and let's leave this out for now. Okay, and then there is a direction as well as how long you want the animation to happen. So we want the animation to happen, for example, 3 times. We want this, the square to rotate 3 times. So we specify that number over here, and we want this to happen alternately. So we specify alternate over here. Let's save this. Okay, let me comment this out. Let's inspect this. So we have our box. So we didn't specify any unit over here. So if we expand this, we see that the animation duration is 0.5 seconds. The animation diamond function by default is ease. Animation delay is 3 seconds. Our iteration count is 1. All right. And the name of the animation is rotation. Let me close this. Let's do a refresh. Let's specify this animation to happen 3 times. Hang on a sec. Am I missing? Oh yeah, I need to specify the unit over here, 360 degrees. So you can see that it is alternating between, let me get rid of this. It is too high, right? 3 seconds of delay. Let me get rid of this. So now you can see that it basically rotated 3 times. Suppose I want this animation to happen infinitely, I can make use of the value as infinite. So you can see that it is rotating clockwise and then anti-clockwise. And because of this alternate function, right, it is alternating between clockwise and anti-clockwise. So this is the animation direction. Okay, if I get rid of this, it will just rotate in one direction. Okay, and it is just rotating between 0 and 360 degrees. Let me increase the and animation duration. So you can see that now it's rotating slowly. And if you see, now it is just directly going from 0 to 360 degrees. Let's add some more keyframes over here. So when it is at 0, we want it to be at 0, for example 0%. Then when the so keyframes basically allow us to specify the different states when the animation is 0% complete. We specify this is the transformation that needs to happen when it is 25% complete. We wanted to transform and rotate by 45 degrees. Similarly, when when it has reached 50% completion, we wanted to rotate by 90 degrees. And similarly, when it is at 75%, we wanted to transform this and rotate by 180 degrees. And then finally at 100%, we want to rotate by a complete of like that, a complete of 360 degrees. So you can see that the behavior has modified slightly. So you can fine tune your animations as well using the different functions. So we can use linear, for example. So you can see that it is happening linearly, right? So this is how you can animate an element. You can rotate it, or you can scale it. Whatever you want to do, you can do that as well. So your transition just happens for a specific duration and then it stops. But using animation, you can you can keep on repeating that particular thing for an infinite period, or you can alternate between the animation. You can make it happen only 10 times, or for example we want this animation to only happen 3 times, right? So it will do that only 3 times. 1, 2, and then 3. Okay, so it just repeated that animation 3 times. And keyframes are basically the motions. We are able to define how the motion is happening. You can imagine keyframes as the uh, it's similar to how a movie works, right? It's basically a photo being projected at a high speed. So we are moving from one state of the picture to the next state very fast, right? So this is what keyframe allow us to do. It allows to define different properties which We can set certain properties and decide what happens at that particular, duration of completion of that animation. So this is how you can do that. More you can try out and playing with this. The link has been provided in the resources associated with this assignment, so you can try out the different ways and smoothen out the animation as well. So it is quite similar to the transition property, but then you have more options available. Okay. All right. The next thing that we will be learning today is CSS variables. So let's create a new folder, variables. Okay. And within that, let's create a index.html. All right. So what I want to do is let's create a style. Let's link a style sheet over here, style.css. Let's add a style file. Okay. And let's move on to variables. And here, let's add some heading. So intro to CSS variables. Right, so just like how we have variables in JavaScript, we can define variables within CSS as well. Let's look at how we can do that. So it's the term is not actually variables. The term that is available to us is known as custom properties, right? So we are targeting the root element right now. The root element, what is the root element, guys, in HTML? Can let me know in the comments. Do you guys remember what is the root element in HTML? Okay, so Shraddha is correct. The root element is the HTML tag, right? All right, and so we are defining variables at the element level, not variables. It is known as custom properties. Okay, like this. So earlier we were defining specific properties like body, background color, light green, for example. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to have this value available as a custom property. So I can define a custom property like this, two hyphens and then some name. So just like how you give a variable a name, you can create a custom property. Okay, so let's call it as background color. Okay, and let's set the value as light green. Okay, and instead of using this value light green, I can make use of this variable var. Okay, and we specify the name of the variable, which is background color. Okay, and when I save this, have I linked? So it is styles.css. Let me correct that, and you can see that now this thing has a light green background. Similarly, let me define a text color. Let's give the text color as white, and I want to make use of the text color over here, and I can say text color like this over here. So you can see that the text color has changed to white. So within an element, when I can define a custom property at element level. since we are defining all of these properties at the HTML element level, all the siblings of this element have access to these variables. Okay, so for example, I define this. mm, Let me do one thing. Let me create a main. Let me add a main tag over here, and let me specify the content is available over here. And what I will do is, instead of using the root, I will define these variables within the main tag. So if you see now, these variables are no longer available within the body tag, right? Because these properties have been defined at the level of the main element. So if we want to access these properties, okay, they can only be accessible within the main element, right? So now if I want to change the background color, so I can say background color and then var like this and specify the actual let me just move this property here. So you can see that only this part of the whatever is within the main tag, that has received a background color. All right, and similarly, let me add a h1 tag over here. This is a heading, right? So even this has access to that property. And let me target the h1 element, and let me set this color over here like this. All right, so since this h1 tag is within the main tag, it has access to this variable or the custom property. Now suppose I add another, we have this another h1 tag over here within the body, right? But this is not getting the white color set to it. So the reason is that this text color property has been defined at this element level. So only this element and its children will have access to this custom property. That is why this h1 tag is in white and this one is in black. Sorry, I said it the other way around. This one is in black and then this one is in white. Okay, so this is another important thing to remember. All right, so is it clear to you guys how the variables behave? So if we move all of this to the top like this, it will not work. Okay, it is giving us an error. It does not understand. So we can only define these variables uh, at within a specific rule, right? So element level rule or class level or index level, but it needs to match some or the other rule. You can't just leave it hanging out like this. Okay, all right, so another useful use case for this is that we have another media type available to us. So we have @media prefers color scheme, and then we have two options available to us: dark, okay, like this. So what we want to do is let's have some default values. Let's set that to let's set them at the root level. So we'll define these variables at the root level. Okay, so the background color in the light mode, let's set it as light gray for example. and the text color as black, or let's make use of HSL for now. Let me give it as black. Let's switch to the HSL mode so you can see everything is at 0%. Let me make this slightly lighter. So let's make it 85% light. It's too light. 95. Okay. Actually, let's just leave it like this. Let's keep the text as black, for example. Okay. And what we want is within our body, we want the background color to be light gray and the text color to be black. All right. Then when we are matching this particular rule, what we want to do is we want to say that the background color is black and uh, the text color is white. Okay, so let me set this to 100%. So the text color is white and the background color is black. Okay, so right now my system is having a dark color preference. Okay, so let's change that. Let me inspect that. So once again we will, let me open the rendering tab. All right, and we will try and emulate the prefers color scheme. So another value that we can use over here is light. So during the day it is light and during the night time it is dark, right? So it allows us to have sort of a color based theme within our application. So right now it is new, no emulation. If I change it to light, you can see that the default values have been set. So when we are in the light theme, the background is gray and all the text color is basically, black, right? We have set this over here. Let me move this over here like this. So the text color is, this one. And then at the body level, we are redefining these variables. Okay, and when we set the color scheme to dark, you can see that the colors have been inverted. So using this, you can define a theme for your website. All right, so based on the system setting, whatever is the system setting at a given point of time, whether you prefer a dark color scheme or a light color scheme. So using this prefers color scheme, we have access to dark and light variables. So we have dark and light. If I save this, you can see that it has switched back to the light version. Okay, if I switch this to light, now we have a different scheme. So these two values are available to us, light and dark. And based on the system setting, if it is dark, you can basically reset these variables. And we have this rule, right? We are making use of these variables over here. So when this media is dark, these variable values have been changed to black and white, and this style gets applied basically over here. And that is how we can switch between a light and a dark theme like this. Okay, so this is the homework for you guys. I want you guys to implement a, dark and a light theme in the portfolio. So define variables. Okay, give a default color, right? And use the colors for the background as well as the text color or any other color. You can have custom properties for them, and then within the dark mode you can give a different value for all of those variables, and just toggle between the different modes, and your website should behave in that fashion, right? So let me set it back to no emulation. Since it is night time for me, the default color theme is dark, right? So these styles are being applied. So this is your homework, and tomorrow when we come back we will see how to implement this. I will give you guys a solution for this. Okay, now let's take a short break of 2 minutes, and then we'll quickly begin with CSS Flexbox. Okay, so were you guys able to follow along so far? Can let me know in the comments. So this is pretty cool, right? Based on this prefers color scheme, you can create a theme, So I'm looking forward to seeing different themes for your portfolios, and this is how you can do that basically. And not only for this, not you can just not only for this purpose, we can also have variables that define the, for example, I'm always using a padding of 16 pixels. So I can have a variable say padding 16 like this, and I can give the value as 16 pixels. Okay, and then wherever I want to use this padding, I can just say padding, and then I can make use of this variable padding 16 like this. So you can see that the spacing has increased. If I want to use this value just for the left padding, I can do so as well. And I can have different values. If I want a padding of 8 pixels, I can define a variable like this. And suppose I want to switch the padding to 8 pixels, all right, so I can do that using this. So the advantage is, for example, I have values like padding large and then padding medium, for example, like this. And suppose I want to change the value for padding throughout the application. Okay, what I can do is, suppose I want to change it from 18 to 24 pixels, so I just change it at this level, right? And the spacing has increased. Let me just add a border, a white border over here, solid, so that you guys can easily see the difference, right? So if we're using variables like these throughout our application, and we want to change the padding throughout the application, we can just make the change at this place, right? And the padding gets affected, it gets reset to the correct value all the places where we are making use of this variable. And similarly we can set this to medium, for example, right? And if I want to change the value for medium to 4 pixels, I can do that, and it gets applied at all the places. So this is also pretty handy in such scenarios as well. So you can have a complete design system. Okay, you can have values, custom properties set for large, medium, and small, and different color palettes. can have different color values. The background color is this, then the text color is like this, primary color for the application is some value, and then you can use those variables throughout the application. All right, so let's move on to the next topic, which is Flexbox. All right. Let me copy the code from here. Let's just have this box class. And for the sake of saving time, I'm just creating a style tag over here and not creating a different style sheet so that you guys can see everything in one place. Okay. All right. And let's move to Flexbox. Okay. So we have this box, right? Let's do one thing. Let's create another class. Let's create a main over here, and let's move this div, and let's rename it to a section. We'll be using semantic HTML tags, and what we want to do is for this main tag, let's define a container class. Okay, let's set that class over here, container, and let me add a couple of more boxes over here. So as you can see that this section is a block level element, right? And all of the multiple sections are appearing on a new line, right? Since this is a block level element, it will take up the entire width which is available to it, right? Let me move this down slightly. And let's dock this here. Okay. So you can see that it's taking up whatever the entire width is available to it. Let me make it like this. Now we have defined a uh, we have this container class, right? So we have another display. Let me dock it like this. So we have another display property available to us known as flex, right? So you can see that the moment I said display flex, okay, all of these boxes moved to the same line, okay, and you can see it has this flex kind of this keyword available. And so what this does is that it makes our items flexible. Okay, when I say display flex, all the items will take up you know the space that it needs, and all of the items which can fit within this available area, it will fit all of those items, and they will you know take up only the space which is required by them. Let me add a couple of more boxes, and let me set display to flex over here. So if you see right now, the boxes are there, but the thing is that all the spacing has been lost, right? Let me get rid of this for now, and let's add a margin of 10 pixels. So now if you notice, uh, now we have given a margin of 10 pixels between all of these boxes, and the initial height and width was 300 pixels. And if we hover over a box now, the width has changed, right? Give me a second. So let me move this here. So you can see that the Flexbox layout, what it tries to do is it tries to fit all of the elements which are inside the container which has the flex display set as flex, and it will automatically adjust the width of those elements to fit all of those elements within a single row. Okay, so this horizontally, this is known as a row. All right, so by default, all the items which are inside uh, this container, which has the display set to flex, are placed horizontally, or are arranged horizontally. Okay, and as we shrink the screen size, it is adjusting the width of those elements. So it's basically the flexible box layout. According to the space which is available, it will automatically adjust the width of the items within that element. Okay. uh, so this is what you can do. You can make use of this flex, and if we reduce the number of boxes, you can see that they are easily fitting over here. So it has the width set as 208, right, and the height of 300, because these can fit comfortably. As I'm increasing, giving it more space, you can see that it is expanding, right? So by default, I have set the width to 300. Let me comment this out. Let me set the width to, for example, 100%. Okay, so now it doesn't have a default width or any restrictions on the width. So as I'm giving it more and more space, the size of the box is also increasing, right? It is going beyond 300, right, in terms of the width. Okay, so this is the advantage of using the flex box layout. So by default, the direction in which the items are uh, laid out, that is row, we can change the direction using something known as the flex direction property. So flex direction by default is row. Let me change it to column, and now you can see that the elements have been stacked vertically, right? Okay, and now if I try to change the height over here, Okay. All right. I need to actually give it a height for that thing to work, but for now, it just since there's a scroll available, with the change, the height is not being changed. Suppose we give this a max height of, 600 pixels, and overflow is hidden, right? So you can see that now it has, as we are, hang on, I need to give the, since we already have a height available, it's not getting applied, but we can do that for this also. I'll get back to you with an example on this, but I hope you guys understood the point, right? So as we are changing the size, the element is flexible and it's accordingly adjusting, uh, uh, so it's automatically adjusting the width for that element. Okay. All right. And so we have some more properties available. This is for changing the direction. Okay. Now let me reset the height back to 300 pixels, and let's get rid of the flex direction. Let's set it back to 300, and let me add more items to this once again. So more items are available. Now what I want is that I wanted to respect the height, the width which I have set. So I want that each box should have a width of 300 pixels. Okay. And if space isn't available, it should move to the next line. So the way I can do this is I can make use of a property known as flex wrap. By default, it is no wrap, and let's set it to wrap. Okay. And now you can see that the boxes have a width of 300, right? The number of boxes that can fit in the available fit are, being shown over here. And the next boxes have been moved to the new line. Okay, as I shrink this, now only one box can fit. Let me get rid of this overflow hidden. Okay, so only one box can fit in only one 300 pixel box can fit within a row. So the rest of them are wrapping to the next line. Okay, so this is how you can, have a responsive design. For example, you want to show different images over here, right? So based on the space which is available, those many images will be rendered in a row like this. And suppose what I want to do is, so I have these boxes. Let me get rid of this margin. Okay, so you can see all of them have merged. There's a special property available to us known as gap, which allow us to specify the gap in between these elements. So suppose I want to give a gap of 16 pixels. So you can see that there's a gap of 16 pixels over here and between each line. Okay, this is recommended instead of using the margin property. All right. And what I want is, suppose these boxes have a width of 100, and what I want is I want some spacing between these boxes. Okay, I want these boxes to fill up the available space which is there and align themselves. So what I can do is I can make use of another property known as justify content. By default it is flex start, right? So all of the items are Starting from the left hand side, if I specify flex end, all of the items shift towards the end. Okay. And if I specify center, all of the items are rendered in the center like this. Okay. So I will say justify content. So when I want to align all of the items within the horizontal direction, I make use of the justify content property, and I can specify center to centrally align them. Okay. I have written this at the wrong place. It should be over here. All right. So justify content center like this. Oops. Center. Let me click outside. What is the problem? Justify content center. Okay, give me a sec. Let me just do it from here. So you can see that all of the items are now being aligned in the center. Suppose I want more spacing between each of these items. What I can do is specify over here space between. Okay. So now you can see that there is spacing between all of the different items. Okay. Suppose I want space around these items, I can make use of the space around property, and you can see that there is spacing around these items. Similarly, what I want is whatever is the available space, right? I want all of these items to be spaced evenly, so I can make use of the space evenly property, and you can see that there is equal spacing between all of these items. Okay. So this is a really wonderful feature of Flexbox, that you can you no longer need to play with margin and you know a position property or something like this, give a, or you make use of translate to move the elements around. You can just make use of this justify content property, and along the x-axis it spaces all of these elements. Either it spaces them evenly, or we can specify that we want to space, we want space between like this, or space around them, so we can do all of that. And if you see this icon which is available, so it allows us to play around with the different properties. So if we change the flex direction to column, right, um, let me stack this over here, and if I change the flex direction over here like this, if it is no wrap, it has changed to column, and if I change it back to row, it is like this, and then I can justify the content. I can play around like this, so it shows the graphical representation. So if we want it in the center, it is this one. If you want it at the beginning, right, so it is telling us it will stick everything to the beginning. Towards the end, we want spacing in between, we want space around, and we want the spacing to happen evenly, so we can do all of that. Okay. Similarly, if we want to align the items within this, so let's do one thing. Let's give our container a height of the entire viewport, like whatever is the visible screen area, let's give it the entire height. So let's set the height as 100 vh, so it indicates 100% of the viewport height. And now if I over here, if I say align items And if I specify center, you can see that these items have moved to the center, right? So we have them. Suppose I want to say these items should be aligned uh, to the center along the horizontal direction as well as the vertical direction. So for the horizontal direction, I say justify content center, and for the vertical direction, I say align item center. So you can see horizontally also they have been aligned centrally, and vertically also they have been placed in the middle. All right. So it is very easy for you to place items in the center using the Flexbox layout. Okay. And there's a comment in the chat about Ajax request, so we'll be covering that topic pretty soon, in a couple of sessions. But anyways, let's focus on the topic at hand right now. So is it clear to you guys how we can position the different elements in different directions using the Flexbox layout? You can let me know within the comments. Okay. All right, let's look at a couple of more properties. So far we have just looked at properties which are, defined at the container or the element which contains all of these items. And, just play around with all of these properties. Wonderful resources have been shared. So if you want to improve your knowledge on this topic, there's a website known as Flexbox Froggy. Okay, it's basically a game, right? And it teaches you all the different properties which are available in the Flexbox, you know setting or the Flexbox layout. And you can just follow the exercises which are available. Suppose we look at the very first level. So by default, this frog is here. Okay, the instruction says that we want this frog to move to its at this position. So we will make use, in order to achieve this, we make use of the justify content property, and we set it to flex end. The moment we set it to flex end, the frog moves to this particular leaf basically. So you can play along, play this game and learn lots of useful properties related to Flexbox. So it's a fun way of learning this topic. Okay, the link to this resource has also been shared on the Devsnest website. When you're doing the assignment, you'll find the link. Okay, so this is a fun way to learn this topic. So another thing that we can do is, so suppose I have only 3 items available. Let me comment this out for now. And also what I want to do is, let's keep this. Now this individual box, okay, this second box, let's create a class as second. All right, and let's define it over here. So when we have box dot second, what we want to do is, we want to make use of the flex basis property, and we want it to have a default size of 5, let's say 400 pixels. Okay, let's save this. And now if you notice that this element is taking up the size as 400 pixels, right? This is the second box, right? So we can make use of the flex basis property to set the initial size for this element, and rest of the elements will adjust accordingly. Okay, if I shrink the size of the available space, you can see that the rest, it's keeping its original size, and rest of the elements are moving about. Okay, because we have set flex wrap to wrap. If I set it to no wrap once again, and if I change it, you can see that this element starts shrinking. Okay, so when we do not specify this property initially, everything is set to whatever the default size is whatever it is, and whether it can fit perfectly within that. If we want some element to have a different size, we can do so. Similarly, we have a flex grow property, and let's set that to 2 for example. So you can see that this item will take up twice the space. Let me comment this out, and you notice that this element will take up twice of the space which is available, and the rest of the items will shrink accordingly. Okay, and if I just set it to 1. Okay, let me do a refresh. Let me comment this out. So these are equally spaced. And suppose I want this item to shrink, right? So I will say flex shrink by 1. Let me show you what I mean. So let's set this to 300, and let's look at the shrink property. And let me set it to 2. So you can see that this element shrinks to twice of the available space. Okay, and if I set it to 1, there is no effect. If I set this once again, so you can see that this has the initial size of 400, and if more space is available, it will grow to it will grow, and if less space is available, it will shrink. Okay, but all the other elements will shrink less, because this will shrink to twice its original size. So you can make use of these properties to define the behavior, like how much an item should expand or shrink based on the available space that is available to it. Okay, the surrounding space which is available to it. And we can combine all of these three properties together using the flex property. If I just set flex 1 to this, okay, and if we look at the let me move it here, and if we look at the the second box, we see that by default flex grow is 1 and flex shrink is 1, right? And flex basis is 0%. And suppose we want that this element grows to twice its size, so flex grow is 2. Okay, and then flex shrink is 1, so it will shrink normally, but it will grow to twice the size which is available. And suppose I want the third, box to take up 50% of the available space, and let's set the class as third over here. And if I save this, okay, you can see that this box is taking up 50% of the available space, and this is the second item can shrink completely. All right, so that is the shorthand property. And you can either specify, so when you just specify the percentage, it understands that you're specifying the flex basis property, so you can make use of percentages or initial values. So suppose if I specify over here that the third box should take up 100 pixels, can make use of this, and I can specify that this one takes up 400 pixels, like this. So this is taking up 100 pixels. This particular element is taking 300, and it has a flex shrink of 1. If I set this, so if I want to set flex shrink to 0, so I'm basically specifying that not the third one, sorry, the second one, I want that the second box should not shrink at all. Okay, and neither do I want it to shrink, neither do I want it to grow. So I can specify the flex grow and shrink to 0. And as I'm moving this, you can see that the second box remains at the same size, and the rest of the elements are basically shrinking or growing. So that is what these values indicate. By default it is set to 1 and 1, so it will shrink and grow according to the space which is available, right? If I do not want it to shrink at all, I can specify this as 0, so it will expand as more and more space is available, but it will never shrink. Okay, but suppose what I want is that I do not want it to grow beyond 400 pixels. So as I'm scrolling more and more, you can see the other items are growing, and this has remained at 400 pixels. But as I'm shrinking, okay, so this is now shrinking as well, since I have set the flex shrink to 1, right? So if I just inspect this element, we can see that flex shrink is 1, flex grow is 0. It will not grow beyond 400 pixels, and the default size is 400 pixels. So this is a shorthand property to set these individual values. So you can use this to set the individual sizes for all of these items within this container, right? So suppose I want that this second box is twice the size and it does not shrink at all. Okay, so I can specify 20, and let's save this. So you can see that it will grow in twice the size, and it will So it will grow to twice its size. It will, since we have not specified any flex basis, right? Any initial size. So it is still, kind of shrinking. Okay. So if we specify a specific size for this, it will not shrink beyond 200 pixels, for example. Okay. So you can see that beyond 200 pixels, it is not, or below 200 pixels, it is not shrinking. And it's growing to, twice of whatever is the available space. So all of the other elements are, not expanding as much as this one. So this is how you can make use of the flex property. All right. I think let's stop here. And as we progress, we'll be using this flex property more and more. So it is enough for the session today. Let's stop here, and then we'll be using this more and more as we progress further, and you guys will have a better understanding. But definitely do go through the resources which have been shared with you and practice the topic, learn about the different properties which are available. So you can, you know this is a very useful layout because it allows us to have some sort of responsiveness by default. We don't even need to use media queries, right? So if I say flex wrap over here, as my screen resolution is changing, so you can see that we have a different layout available based on the width of the screen, right? So we can avoid media queries over here in most of the cases, but in some cases we can make use of media queries as well if we want a specific layout, right? So yeah, you can do that. You can align items, you can decide how an item shrinks and grows, and what is the default size for an item. All of this is possible using Flexbox. Okay, so this is it for this session. And yeah, we will be learning about CSS grid as well in the coming session. So there's a question, which one to use. uh, it depends, based on what you're trying to achieve. Certain things are easier to do using Flexbox, certain things are easier to do using CSS grid. So there is no one solution or one particular way of going about things. Different situations require different solutions. So you will understand, when you start using all of these concepts, you will know which one is easier for you to use, and you can select that particular solution. Okay. So there's a question, media query is what? So you watched the beginning of this tutorial, and uh, you will find out what are media queries. That was the first topic which we covered today. So these are media queries, right? When we use the media keyword and define different say we target different conditions, different screen types, and orientation, and also specify target different viewports. All of that is possible using media queries, and it allows us to write a responsive design for our application. Okay. So uh, yeah, so let's stop here, and I'll see you guys in the doubt session within the Discord channel. So um, let's meet there, and that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the session and learned new things. And I'm looking forward to seeing, the media queries or the responsiveness being added to your portfolios. And you guys can add different effects for the navigation menus. I'm looking forward to that. And for finding the content useful, like and subscribe to the channel, and share the bootcamp details with your friends or colleagues who who want to learn web development, right? Okay, so let's stop here.